All right, I think maybe I'll get started. And I know that we've got a couple of our panelists that are hopefully joining soon, as well as our moderator. So we can't really get started without her, but I'll do some introductory housekeeping and kind of set this webinar up for everybody. As I mentioned before, for those of you who haven't heard already, my name is Steve Ellis. I live in Yellowknife with my family in the Northwest Territories, and I'm the director of MakeWay's Northern Program, which operates across the 3 territories and the 4 regions of Inuit and Inunga. So that's a little bit about me. A little bit of housekeeping here. The webinar will essentially have the following structure. After I'm done yapping, we'll turn it over to our moderator and our panelists from communities across the Northwest Territories and Nunavut to introduce themselves and their programs briefly. And then we'll turn it over to Christina and Shari, who will run through a summary presentation outlining some of the key findings around the economic benefits of the essential services that are provided by Hunter and Guardian programs across Northern and Indigenous communities. Following that, our moderator Kunuk will moderate a conversation with the panelists and speakers from the communities, as well as Christina and Shari. And then we'll open up to questions at the end. We should have about 20 minutes to 30 minutes for questions. The best way, or the only way, I think, to actually submit your questions is to do it in the chat. And our moderator will monitor the chat and throw the questions to the panelists or the most appropriate person on the call as needed. So I hope that's clear. If there's any questions, just throw them in the chat and we'll try to address them. One final note, some of you probably heard that the webinar is being recorded, so just FYI on that. After this webinar, we'll be posting the recording on our website so that people who weren't able to attend in person are able to go see it on a link online. With that, I'll proceed to giving a bit of an introduction to the purpose of this webinar and why we commissioned this piece of research. I think if you were to visit any small northern remote town and ask about, hey, what's the value of a hunter or what's the value of a guardian, you'd be sort of met with befuddlement and confusion because the understanding of the value of these types of positions and roles in community is so innate and so intuitive that it's not really something for debate or discussion. It just is. It's acknowledged as important and critical, and it's acknowledged that the benefits that these types of roles, hunters, guardians, monitors, whatever you might call them, I like to term them full-time land-based professionals, just to acknowledge that these are careers to be on the land, to take care of the land, to make use of the land and water. And yeah, as I mentioned, these types of roles are well understood to have high value and some of the most important value in our Northern and Indigenous communities. But it's not often easy to communicate that innate sense of value to those who have not been born and bred in that type of environment, in a small community, Northern Indigenous environment. And so when it comes to affecting policy decisions, it can be a challenge for the types of people that we'll have as panelists today to convince funding agencies, policymakers, and so on and so forth that their programs are worthy of support. In fact, perhaps more worthy of support than many other investments that public and private funders put their efforts towards, and are not only nice to haves, but need to haves. These are essential, critical services in community that not only are deserving of support, but are essential to have support. And so that's really the provenance of this whole effort, is that we wanted to communicate in the language of data and economic analysis the value of these positions and the types of benefits they bring to community, and to turn into dollar figures the advantages and the savings and the benefits, the economic benefits that these types of programs can instill in the community. So that's where this program came from, this analysis over multiple years, and both Christina and Shari will get into the details in a bit. I'm going to pass over to our moderator if she is here. Is Kunuk online right now? I don't believe so. I'm not sure what's happened technically, but hopefully she was online, but not here anymore. So hopefully someone is able to connect with her. I think what we will do then is immediately transition over to Christina and Shari with the presentation, which will start with some introductions from our four panelists and a little bit of an overview of their programs. Does that make sense, Christina? Okay.
So I'm Christina Hackett. I work with the CoEvaluation Lab. We're a small research and evaluation organization specializing in collaborative research and evaluation. I'll flip it over to Shari to introduce yourself and then to the programs.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Shari Fox. I wear a number of hats, but one of those hats is I'm the co-founder and senior advisor for the Ittaq Heritage and Research Center in Clyde River. I work with Mike Jaypoody. Ittaq was founded in 2005, and we've been running the Inuvialuit program that you'll hear about today since 2020. And I've been working with Christina and CoEval on this project and with the communities and with MakeWay for about 4 or 5 years now on this project. So we're super excited to report on it today to all of you. I'll turn it to the reps from the communities now so you can hear about the 4 programs that we worked with. And we have just a few minutes each, but you can get an idea where these programs are, a little bit about the uniqueness of each one, but you'll also hear about commonalities across and maybe a little bit about the impacts and benefits that they see in their own communities before we jump into the whole report. So Mike, I'll ask you to go first just to introduce yourself, and we'll start with the Inuvialuit program.
Thank you for having us. My name is Mike Jaypoody. I'm the director of Ittaq Heritage and Research Center here in Clyde River. One of the unique programs that we run is the line programming, which is Inuvialuit. And I think not too long ago, you wouldn't be able to think that you would have a profession of being a hunter as a full-time employee. So that's become a very essential for the community that also has a very unique way of teaching young people to be able to learn of survival in the Arctic. And it's always a very successful experience when we have the participant being able to harvest anything for the first time and being able to share with the community and their families who don't really have any transportation to go out hunting. So, and one of the things that we've experienced is that the previous participant, which are now able to support the Angundajuti in a way when they need help going out on the land, that they are able to be the snowmobile support in any way they can. So that's been a very positive outcome of the program. And we do a lot of other stuff here at Ittaq, but I think one of the things we are proud to say that we also have a digital atlas project that we've been working on for some time, and we have about 200 recordings of place names in Institute that people can look into and the pronunciation and so on, and that's been quite an experience to work with. So I'm hoping that we will have a good outcome of this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I'll just go by who I see on the screen. Kirt, could you introduce your program?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kirt Ruben. Born in the small community of Halton Northwest Territories, been living in Inuvik for 20 years. I work with the Joint Secretariat as a community-based monitor program manager, and I've been in my position for 7 years. I help facilitate, coordinate, run, and supervise the MakeWay program, which is owned by the Inuvik and Ittaq Hunters and Trappers. With their approval from April 1st to November 30th, I facilitate the MakeWay monitors who patrol the Inuvik Highway regarding fish and fish habitat waste and sediment, permafrost erosion, and anything related to fish habitat and fish-bearing creeks and lakes that flow into our lake Inuvialuit Inuvialuit lake called Husky Lakes. Program was implemented in June 2018. We're currently on our 7th year. It's nice to be on this panel to help promote and network our program. We look forward to questions after introductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirt. Next, we'll go to Iris.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Iris Catholique. I am the Dene manager in a community called Lutsel. Lutsel is in the Northwest Territories, and I manage the Indigenous Protected Park there. And I guess one of the programs that I'm here to talk about and share some of the outcomes with you is about one of our programs called our Dene Guardian program. So this Indigenous park, it's one of the newest parks in Canada. It was established in 2019. It's an Indigenous protected area, and our partners are Parks Canada and the GNWT of the Northwest Territories. So roughly we monitor and maintain an area that's 26,000 square kilometers. And our Dene is quite a big program right now. In the beginning, they started in 2008, but by the time 2019 came, we got implementation dollars. And with those implementation dollars, we're able to have quite a few guardians. I've got 6 full-time guardians. I've got 2 part-time elder advisors. In the summer, we hire up to 6 youth every summer. And so the program goals that we have with our Dene are to maintain the integrity and cultural sites within the park. We welcome visitors, and we offer interpretation about the history of our traditional territory. We monitor and document all the visitors that come into the park. And then we also do a lot of harvesting for the community. So that's a lot of hunting of caribou, muskox, moose, fishing. We offer on-the-land camps 4 times a year for every season. So with that, we have a lot of assets, and so our folks are able to work with, the best equipment. They have boats and skidoos and quads, and we're ever evolving and ever growing. And it's quite funny because, like, in the beginning when we first established the park, we had nothing, but now we're such a big thing in the community that it's the go-to place for employment and for being able to give back to the community in all different kinds of ways for our community members and visitors. So that's my 2 minutes, I think.
Thank you, Iris. We have one more introduction, and then we'll pass over to Kunuk, who will introduce herself and lead things off with Christina and Shari doing the presentation, and then moderate the conversation after that. So over to you, Lianne, last but not least with Dechinta.
Wasicho. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lianne Charlie. I am a faculty member with Dechinta Center for Research and Learning and a board member. We have participated in this project since 2021, and most of our focus area has been on the impacts of providing post-secondary education to Indigenous folks in NWT and providing consistent, reliable employment to knowledge holders as staff members for our land-based programming. And some of our data has also been around food security, supporting folks to hunt, fish, and provide food, protein alternatives to what's available in the stores. I know this project best as a faculty member, as someone who's been on the ground connecting with post-secondary students and following them through their post-secondary journey with programs with us. And then now we're at a place to look at the data and the impacts of having community-based, community-driven access to post-secondary accredited programming designed by their elders and community. I'm really looking forward to hearing the findings from others and interacting with the audience. So must see.
Thanks so much, Lianne. Over to you, Kunuk. The floor and the webinar is yours.
Thanks. Sorry, guys. I was signed on, then I was kicked out, and then I didn't have the permission to speak. So now I do. Welcome, everyone. I'm super excited that you're all here visiting us to talk about really important work. And it's already been introduced, so I won't go into that too much. You've met the amazing people that deliver these programs at a time when we're facing federal cuts, and there's uncertainty in terms of whether some of the Guardian programs are going to continue. And but you'll hear from the researchers, the two doctors, that I'm teasing them partly with this comment, that these programs are so valuable, not just, you'll hear more of the monetary aspect of things, that when you invest in these programs, the returns are massive. And it makes you think if there's less funds to go around, wouldn't it make sense to invest in these types of programs? And you'll hear a conversation around food security, health, job satisfaction. But from those of us, as Steve stated earlier, we just feel the value of these in our communities. And there's like so much intangible aspects to these programs, like the community cohesion, the resurgence of land knowledge and knowledge systems and transferring of knowledge, the kinship ties, and the spiritual aspect to it. So I'll hand it over to the two doctors, and then we'll wait for people to ask questions in the comments.
Thanks, Kunuk. Maybe I'll go first, just because it will flow to Christina, who's going to do most of the talking, because we really wanted this to focus on the impacts and benefits and the investment pieces, why this makes such good sense investment-wise from both the perspective of communities, but also funders and other supporters of these programs, or who should be supporters of the programs. But before we launch into that, I just wanted to take a moment to thank the 4 programs that just introduced themselves. This was a really great team to work with. We've been working together now for about 4 or 5 years, along with Steve, Lori, others at MakeWay, Melissa. Thank you guys for being part of it. What you're about to learn really comes from the dedication of these programs, especially those working on the land. They had to do a lot of documentation. They had to answer a lot of questions from us as researchers to really get the evidence that we needed to create the story about the impacts and benefits of these programs. So it was a lot of work on the ground. We had meetings online, in person, and I just wanted to give a shout out to all the programs here today and others that are so dedicated to their communities, to their land, to their community members, and doing this work. So I really hope that you enjoy the presentation and you learn from it. And I'll pass it over to Christina, who will walk you through the main components of that report. And then both of us, along with the programs, will be here for your questions. And we're happy to talk more about things like, program operations, or like Kunuk mentioned, the many other intangible and tangible aspects of this work. But for the next bit, we'll focus on the magic of Christina and her CoEval lab and how all of this makes such good sense when we talk about funding in order to have such amazing impacts for communities.
Thanks, Shari. Let's see if I can get this right. Can we see the slides? So welcome everyone, and thanks again for joining us today. As I mentioned, I'm Christina. I'm a health economist and evaluation specialist with the CoEvaluation Lab, and I'm presenting this work in partnership with Shari and the 4 amazing programs we've just heard from and have been working with for several years now. Today, I'm going to walk you through the public investment case for Indigenous Hunter and Guardian programs. These are programs designed and led by Indigenous communities across the North. And what our work shows is that they deliver significant measurable returns across multiple policy areas. So the headline is that for every dollar invested, these programs return between $1.43 and $5.37, depending on the program and which outcomes you include, which is a strong return by any public investment standard. Here's a quick roadmap for the talk today. We'll start with how we're defining Hunter and Guardian programs. Then we'll walk through the 4 programs work, walk through the return on investment methodology, break down the returns across 5 policy areas, and close with the policy ask. The thing to flag up front, these programs generate value across multiple government portfolios simultaneously. That cross-portfolio return is central to the case that we're making. So what are Hunter and Guardian programs? At their core, these are Indigenous designed, locally led programs where hunters and guardians earn their primary livelihood through hunting, harvesting, and stewardship of their lands, waters, and communities. As we've mentioned, these programs are inherently valuable, and these activities have been practiced for millennia. By undertaking these analyses, we're not setting out to prove their value. We are communicating a fraction of this value using a specific language and set of parameters. These programs operate across multiple interconnected domains, 4 of which are food security and sovereignty, health and well-being, ecological conservation, and Indigenous-centered economic development. These aren't siloed programs. Each one generates value across all 4 of these domains at the same time, and that's what makes the case so compelling. So we've heard a little bit about the amazing work that the 4 programs we work with do, and each of these programs work to develop responsive evaluations, each offering a different perspective on value. So Dechinta tracks hunted food, student and elder health and well-being, and educational attainment and labor market outcomes. The Inuvialuit monitors track data related to monitoring the Inuvialuit highway and cost savings in terms of cost of research, infrastructure, and traffic safety. The Dene track information related to monitoring activities, search and rescue, harvested food, and much more. And the Inuvialuit track information about hunting, food access and distribution, student harvesters attendance and well-being, and student and hunter labor market outcomes. So let me walk you through how we calculated these numbers because the methodology matters. So we use 2 complementary lenses. The first is a community economic perspective. So we asked, what is the value of this investment to northern communities? This is straightforward. So we measured the store-bought equivalent of hunted and harvested foods at local grocery store prices. We apply this across the 3 programs doing hunting and harvesting activities, so the Dene, Dechinta, and Inuvialuit. I should make very clear this is one pathway to valuation and does not in any way represent the full value to communities. So the second is a payer or taxpayer perspective. We asked, what is the return to governments and Canadian taxpayers? This uses social cost benefit analysis, or SCBA, calculating the net present value of long-term outcomes. We connected program outcomes to population level research literature and then to dollar values. Outcomes were measured and monetized across the various domains. This two-perspective approach means we can speak to both community value and fiscal returns, which is important when you're making the case to different audiences. So what is a social cost benefit analysis? An SCBA widens the aperture of a typical cost benefit analysis and compares total benefits, social, economic, environmental, against total cost to estimate net value to society. The net present value is the calculation that turns future benefits and costs into over time to see if it's a net gain. We use this because an investment today in health, education, well-being often takes years to materialize in terms of outcomes to society. The NPV number allows us to calculate the future benefit of investing today in today's dollars. For example, as a society, we invest in K-12 education, not because it provides an immediate return to the taxpayer, but because it pays dividends across the life course. So using the diagram to map the causal chain of the analyses, I'll give one example of a pathway to valuation. So having more time on the land means more time connecting to culture and hunting and harvesting. This leads to an increased volume of harvested food in the community, increase in food access, relating to a reduction in food insecurity. And then we have population data that shows that changing marginal levels of food insecurity leads to avoided downstream health costs and increased well-being. These estimates capture a small fraction of total value, especially since the value can never be fully reduced to a dollar amount. So let's start with food security from the community economic perspective. So the Nihatni Dene harvested $321,000 in store-bought equivalent food value from January to October 2023. That's 10 months. Importantly, they were a crucial source of food during the 2023 NWT wildfires when other sources of food were disrupted. Dechinta harvested just under $200,000 cumulatively of store-bought equivalent food value from spring 2021 to fall 2023. And the Anganasuti harvested just under $420,000 of store-bought equivalent food value over 3 years from 2022 to 2025, roughly $100,000 per year. $140,000 per year. We estimated that the store-bought dollar value of the country food harvested could fully feed 6 households of 5 people in Clyde River for 1 whole year. Combined, that's approximately $614,000 in yearly average store-bought equivalent food value across these 3 programs. In communities where a jug of milk can cost $12 or $15 or more, this is not a marginal contribution. It's a fundamental part of the food system. Now let's look at food security from the payer perspective, the avoided health costs. This is based on the Anganasuti's 2024 calendar year data. When children, youth, and adults have access to harvested country food, this relates to reduced food insecurity and downstream reductions in food insecurity-related health system use. For children and youth, $122,000 were yielded in avoided healthcare costs over the life course. For adults, $351,000. Combined, that's $473,000 in avoided health system costs per year for the community. These are conservative estimates. They only capture the health system savings from avoided downstream costs. They don't account for the broader nutritional, well-being, cultural, or economic benefits. The actual value is almost certainly higher. In terms of health and well-being, based on Dechinta's program data tracking changes in student and elders' health and mental health, we calculated savings in terms of their downstream health service use. So changes in self-reported health from having access to responsive, Indigenous-centered post-secondary education generated $78,000 per year of avoided lifetime downstream healthcare utilization for students. For elders, a reduction in social isolation and increased well-being was calculated to generate $161,000 of avoided downstream healthcare utilization. This is a combined minimum of just under $240K of avoided health systems costs per year of programming. In terms of labor market and education outcomes, Dechinta's land-based post-secondary education program generates $3.5 million in lifetime marginal tax revenue per cohort of students projected across working lives to age 65. On top of that, $4.4 million is yielded in avoided lost productivity, preventing the macroeconomic loss that comes from lack of access to responsive, culturally relevant post-secondary education for Northern Indigenous students. The Anganasuti generate $574,000 in lifetime marginal tax revenue per student cohort based on improved labor market access and access to networks and mentoring relationships, and $173,000 in lifetime tax revenue per year employed per full-time hunter compared to median community salaries. Both programs create full-time, year-round employment and expand educational pathways, especially for Indigenous youth. This is exactly the kind of outcome that aligns with stated labor market and education policy goals to reduce structural inequities and enhance pathways to meaningful work. Now for life satisfaction and well-being. This is where the numbers really grow. We monetize changes in life satisfaction using established economic methods. So for the Anganasuti hunters, full-time hunter employment drives life satisfaction gains valued at $4.8 million over their working lifetimes. And for Dechinta students and elders, pre and post program changes in life satisfaction are valued at $5.6 million over lifetimes. And across all 4 programs, 18 staff showed an increase in life satisfaction valued at $676,000 per year to society. These are real, measurable changes in people's lives, and they have significant economic value when methods used to evaluate other public health interventions are applied. In terms of ecological conservation and monitoring, I want to flag that the environmental knowledge, monitoring, and stewardship inherent in hunter and guardian roles has tremendous economic value that sometimes goes unrecognized by funders. So the Nihat ni Dene, as we heard, monitor caribou herds and critical, habitat, maintain the integrity of cultural sites, provide harvested food, and welcome visitors while conducting environmental monitoring. The Inuvialuit monitors stewardship of the Inuvik-Tuk Highway, generate avoided road repair costs for sinkholes, washouts, and erosion along the highway corridor. They provide beaver and invasive species mitigation, road safety incident prevention, and wildlife monitoring equivalent to $350 per day provided free to researchers, with research trip savings of $10,000 to $15,000 per trip per researcher. This work builds on existing Guardians' return on investment research. The NWT Guardians demonstrated significant positive return on social return on investment in a 2016 report. Our report adds the food, health, and labor market dimensions to that evidence base. So this slide puts it all together in one table. I won't read every line, but I want to draw your attention to the breadth. Food security across 3 programs. Health and well-being, including life satisfaction, valued at $676,000 per year across all 4 programs. Labor market and education, generating millions in lifetime tax revenue and avoided GDP loss. And ecological conservation, where analyses are ongoing. The point here is that no single government department captures the full return. The value crosses health, education, labor market, environment, and Indigenous services portfolios, all from the same programs. So here are the bottom line return on investment numbers from our social cost benefit analysis. For Dechinta, if you include only health and employment outcomes, the return is $2.25 for every dollar invested. When you add life satisfaction and well-being, it rises to $3.70. For the Anganasuti, food security and employment alone return $1.43 per dollar invested, including life satisfaction and well-being, it's $5.37 per dollar invested. These are strong returns, and I want to emphasize the lower bound estimates only capture 2 outcome categories, both of which we calculated with super conservative guardrails. The true return, when you account for the full range of benefits these programs deliver, is higher. This brings us to the policy ask, and it's a straightforward one. So these programs are not only cultural or land-based initiatives, they are smart, strategic public investments, and 4 things need to happen. First, long-term sustainable funding, moving away from short-term project-based grants. Treat these programs as essential services with multi-year core funding on par with other publicly funded health and social programs. Second, equitable compensation and infrastructure. Hunters and guardians should be compensated at rates equivalent, to other essential service workers. The return on investment data shows this investment pays back to the public purse. Paying them a living wage is not a sunk cost. Third, recognize the full cross-portfolio value. Benefits of these programs sprawl across health, education, labor, and environment budgets. Funding should reflect that cross-portfolio return rather than being siloed under a single department. And fourth, support community-owned data, invest in Indigenous data sovereignty and Indigenous-led data systems so that communities can continue building the evidence base on their own terms for accountability, program improvement, and future funding advocacy. I'll close with this. These programs have always mattered. The communities running them have always known that. What this research does is provide the numbers for those who may need them to make the case in policy and funding conversations. $614,000 per year in store-bought equivalent food value across 3 programs. Over $473,000 per year in avoided health system costs. More than $8 million in lifetime tax revenue and avoided GDP loss from 1 program alone, and an overall return on investment of up to $5.37 per dollar invested when you include well-being outcomes. I'll leave you with a quote from the Hunter Exchange project that occurred in Clyde River and Makkovik. Inuit already have a food system, and it works. Investing in our food system is what will improve our food security and accomplish much more. The solution to northern challenges is to properly and respectfully resource the Indigenous systems that have successfully sustained these communities for millennia. The evidence is clear. These programs work. The investment case is strong. What's needed now is the will to fund them properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. We've got a couple of questions directed towards your research, and then there's a question towards Mike. So I think I'll deal with the questions around the research first. One is Kim Neal, who's basically appreciating the community grounded aspect to this research and wondering over the 5 years what the approximate costs were to deliver this analysis, including time spent by communities to collect and share data that this report is based on.
That's a really great question. I think I might open it up to the programs to talk a little bit about the time investment, and then maybe Steve, you could talk a little bit about the investment in doing this work.
Are we waiting for Steve?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Sorry, I was reading.
Okay.
We're having a hiccup.
I could go first then. I mean, there's two parts. I mean, so, MakeWay helped commission the work, and we supported the researchers to do their multi-year partnership with the four communities. And so we have some sense of what that costs, but, we'd have to hear from Lianne, Kirt, and Iris, and Mike about sort of the labor effort on their part, which is not insignificant. I would say that what we really wanted was not we wanted a long-term longitudinal study, so multi-year investment in making sure we had strong data sets here and making sure we had the best of the best involved in the work. So the two doctors. And so I don't know what our annual budget was for this, but it's certainly, between 200 and 300,000 a year in investment on our part to make sure that people were able to visit communities, to work directly with people in those communities, that they are engaged and helpful, not only in collecting data, but helping design systems and were, general value adds to the programs that they were supporting. Not to speak for any of the community programs, but I know that, the lift on their end to collect the data and to be invested in that, not only involved, hours per day for, hours every week for certain staff people, but sometimes devoted staff people engaging with the researchers to do this work as part of their job description. So a heavy lift for sure.
And maybe I'll just mention, maybe someone from MakeWay can drop in the chat a link to the toolkit that we developed for doing evaluation of these kind of programs. I see some people are saying they're interested in how they might do it. So early on in this work, in sort of a different phase before, with MakeWay, we developed a toolkit that's available online. So if you have a program and you're interested in doing evaluation, it kind of walks you through some of the steps on like things you need to collect or questions to ask as a way to get started. So that's available. And then I might just mention that like each of the communities in this work went through evolution of tools that they used to help document their work. And that ranged from, collecting prices at the store, quantitative sort of numbers of participants, that kind of data, up to storytelling, which is one of the strengths at Ittaq. So we had done 2 videos. If you visit ittaq.ca, you can look at a couple of videos about the program, and that's important data collection as well, like documenting that aspect of this kind of work. So it's hard to put a number on all of that in the many years. I'm not sure how to do that, but like Steve said, it was a heavy lift and a lot of dedication on the part of everyone. But we do have that toolkit if you're interested to see how you might run it, a similar kind of look in your program.
Yeah, and I think that also answers Lutz's question about the process and steps that were used. So that would be in the toolkit. Yes.
Yeah, I think it would help. Every community and every program is different, but that would definitely be a place to start.
Okay. And there's a question from Dave Smith directed to Mike about salmon enhancement and hatcheries. There's no salmon where we live. We have Arctic char and we have no hatcheries. So I'll skip that. But part of the question is about stewardship education programs. Maybe Mike, you can talk a bit about how youth are involved in the Inuvialuit program.
Thank you. Just to answer the salmon thing again, but we rarely see them, but we are seeing them more and more, not more and more, but frequently in the last couple of years or so, like 1 or 2 caught in the nets somewhere in the fjords. So that's what we have for salmon. But in terms of the youth being part, and it's always a challenge in ways to find the right youth who may want to go and learn a bit about what we do and what we offer. In ways, we have to rely on the most people who are here most often asking to go with the guys. So that has been one of the issues that we come across, is finding people who, or youth who are able to go. Sometimes we experience like, well, I can't go anymore. It's like it makes us have to look for some other people to go with. So that's one of the challenges that we've been coming across, but we are learning as we go. So that's been one of the experiences that we've been having.
And it's so inspiring to watch the young people start to go off on their own, right? From the skills that they've learned through the university program. There's a question here about whether this, from JM, whether this research has been shared with federal or territorial governments. And maybe I'll add, how widely has this research been shared to Christina and Shari?
Well, we're sharing it now. There's the report that's been online, but I think Dechinta has, not to put you on the spot, Lianne, but Dechinta has shared it, I think, with I'm not sure if territorial policymakers or other, but maybe I could flip it to you if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, for sure. I actually wouldn't mind. Is it okay if I just first speak to Kim's question a little bit? Because we touched on it a bit, but I was reflecting on what this has looked like on the ground first. So just to give you a little background as like a case study for the question, Dechinta is an organization that has already existed for 15 years. So we had some of our own like systems in place and permanent staff. I believe we had one FTE, so one full-time employee working on this project, like focusing on the work with Christina. We all kind of had to get a feel for what evaluation of this nature looks like in an organization. We all had to sort of skill up in that area. And Christine's group and colleagues were so supportive of that. But that one FTE over the 4 years did lots of additional training, one-on-one work with Christina and the group, and then did lots of sort of translation work between our like land-based teams, our elders, our knowledge holders, and the evaluation team. So how to actually translate some of the knowledge, how our land-based teams already knew these processes and ways of being, and could very well like point to the impacts, but then how do you translate into things like ROI and numbers that the government and the federal government want to see. So yeah, Kim, just to give you a sense of what that has sort of looked like over time for us at Dechinta. And then I think Steve also spoke to this a little bit. We all kind of added a few hours a week to our workloads, carrying out this data collection in different ways throughout our workdays. I know that my colleague, Kelsey Wrightson, who was the ED of Dechinta for 7 years, could definitely speak to the question coming from Joseph about how this information has been brought to bureaucrats, federal and territorial government, because she has been the front line of bringing that information forward. As a board member, myself, I know that this work has served as a backbone for us. It certainly puts a lot of the sort of like anecdotal, like body held knowledge, the stuff that we see, the impacts that we see on the ground, on the ice, when we're out there pulling net, and we see young kids like bringing bags of fish, you know, home to their aunties. Like we all see that in the day to day. The qualitative nature, the narrative aspects of that are extremely powerful through video, photographs, story, like text narrative, but being able to translate those kinds of impacts into ROI and quantitative data has been, I think, extremely influential, especially at those tables. If you want more details about that, I think that would require probably reaching out to Kelsey Wrightson and us being able to speak to that in a little bit more detail. But it is present for us. And at those tables, I understand that it's been important for bureaucrats to hear the information packaged this way. Let's see.
Thank you. And I think on that note, I want to try to bridge this research and in the importance of this research and having the numbers to basically speak the value. But I want to hear from Iris and Kirt about just trying to give space to everybody equally in the space, about their observations in terms of personal impacts they've seen their programs have, the empowerment stories that are not as visible, I guess. So I'll pass it over to Iris and then Kirt.
All right. Okay, well, thank you. So yeah, I guess I'll just talk about the Nihatni Dene program. It's been around for a while. The Nihatni Dene program was originally a seasonal program, mainly before we had a park established. It was mainly there to, I guess, monitor water quality and fish health. And then as you know, time goes, you know, the program has grew to a point where it's not just water and fish that we monitor. We monitor, you know, just about every single species in the park, in addition to, you know, making sure that folks that work for us have, you know, like the traditional teachings and background and our history. In our language, we call it Dene Chani, like the ability to know the Dene way of life. So you have to bridge both a traditional way of life with, you know, the Western academic way of life, and put all of these things together, and to be able to, you know, quantify, you know, and explain what the value of things are, because people, you know, don't understand, you know, the value of some things that may not seem to be important, but are important to folks. Like even, you know, observations like was it last year and the year before, there were absolutely like no bugs. There was no mosquitoes, hardly any black flies. And I think we think that's because of the forest fires, right? That's an impact. And so we're wanting to do some more research on that this year. You know, everything has an impact, but I want to tell a little story about some of our young people. So we have a lot of youth that come and work for us every summer. And part of that is a lot of training, safety training in the beginning. And then they come and work with us. And I remember this one young girl, like she was very scared to be in a boat. She was very scared to handle any kind of power tool. And then she took the chainsaw safety training, and she, in the beginning of the program, she's like, my goal this year is to learn how to use that thing and be able to do it well. By the end of the summer program, nobody else was cutting wood except for her. That was her chainsaw, you know, and she was such a pro at it. And often, like, we do a lot of outreach too. We go to the school, and we do workshops with the school to talk to them about our programming and things that they would like to see with our on the land camps. And it's quite often that when we go into the school with the guardians, a lot of the young kids there are always like, well, what kind of courses do I need to take to come work for you guys? I want to be a guardian. Like, what should I focus on? And so we're always trying to push folks to try and expand their educational goals and to get into, conservation, environmental training programs that are offered across Canada. So just to build up capacity, right? So we're such a young program and we're ever evolving that I think a lot of the impacts that we see locally in the community are good things. A lot of folks are working now. People have full-time jobs. In a very small community of like 350, jobs are very hard to find. And we're growing. Like, we keep hiring people more and more. I just finished hiring 7 people last week. So it makes a difference, and it's a positive difference in what I can see. So bringing economic stability into homes is something great. And I think that can happen in a lot of these remote communities that can and are starting these guardian programs. I don't want to take up too much time, but that's just, some of my observations, very small part of it. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Kirt?
Yeah. Thanks, Iris, for the segue. I always lead back to the guy I respect the most. His name is Lenny Imahuk. Lenny has been with the MakeWay program since the day it was implemented back in June 2018. And we always refer to Lenny as a godfather because essentially that's what he is. He's a traditional knowledge holder. And his connection and partnership and collaboration with Western science researchers who are in and around the Inuvialuit Highway from July to August. He's absolutely amazing. And your question just leads me to like something so personal to me. So I've been with the Joint Secretariat with Community-Based Monitor as a program manager for 7 years. And I'm always want to stay in meetings. I'm the greenest person through any harvesting situation ever. If you're looking for a berry picker, you're talking to him. Yeah, but anyways, it leads me to my love for my Inuvialuit tradition. It began with Lenny on my first day of working with the MakeWay program. Just the amount of information he's able to share through culture and tradition. His investment for me to do better in my position daily, it just shows in the last 7 years, and I'm so proud to be part of something that's preserving and preservation for the Inuvialuit culture. The Inuvialuit Highway is 140 kilometers one way, and we have Inuvik and Tuck hunters and trappers going from kilometer 0 to 70, and the opposite, 70 to 148 north and south. And I stated earlier, when the program first started, fish and fish habitat was sort of our baseline study. And the program has evolved in so many other different ways. But preservation and protection, and the program is Inuvialuit led and driven. Our monitors are all Indigenous Inuvialuit monitors. Although our program is 7 months, I always state that we offer more data collection than DFO, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, GNWT infrastructure and transportation, and environment climate change combined, for the simple fact that our direct duties are for preservation and protection of our Inuvialuit lifestyle. So, I don't want to say the age because I'm kind of shy of how old I am now. 7 years into it, And my passion for Inuvialuit culture and tradition has grown exponentially because of Lenny. And you could see it grow with the community members in Tuck and the town of Inuvik. So that impact alone is it's so positive and heartwarming. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. I think that leads to a question about like what each program that's present here, what is your hope for the future with these type of programs or with your program? I'll start with Mike.
There's a lot of possibilities of looking at the future, I would think, but in a way that I hope we will be able to pass our knowledge enough so that our young generation are able to survive out on the land and continue this knowledge passing even beyond us. So that's one of the things that I think we have been talking about here at work is we don't judge people for not knowing what or how to tie a Hamutik, or we just learn by watching. So that's one of the issues and topics that we come across is never to judge any youth who are not able to because we don't always know what we're doing, right? For first time doing things, it's like you expect me to know how to tie a Hamutik or start a Coleman stove. It's like that's sort of very root in our culture in a way that you have to pass the knowledge by teaching or letting them see or watch you what you're doing. So for the future, I believe we have enough interest of the youth who are able to continue providing for the community. So I'm hoping that answers a little bit of the question.
Lianne, what's your hope for the future?
My hope personally, or well, it was really interesting to see in Christina's presentation that core funding is like a fundamental policy ask. We are very much in like facing some funding precarity. And at this point are until the fall, until we hear from the federal government, are sort of going fiscal year to fiscal year, which doesn't really set us up to continue this kind of research. And with support from the GNWT, we can continue our programming in the NWT, but we have expanded through the support of federal funding to other regions in the north. So core funding would be incredible. There's a couple questions there that I've also in the Q&A section that I've found intriguing, and I was just wondering if it was okay if I spoke briefly to them. One piece reflecting on this for the question around what David's questions about what foundational aspects are required. One of the things I was thinking about is that, and I've heard this from this group just now, is that we already like know how to carry out this work in our ways in our community, in ways that are culturally relevant and respectful. We know who the right people are to go to. We know who can do what and who's a really good teacher, and who knows, who's got the camps and the good fishing spots. And a key piece has been like a community champion, someone who knows the sort of familial connections, knows the land really well, and can bring people together who have those skills. And then the key piece that I found that I think MakeWay really helped us with And then like Christina, the collab, sorry, I'm forgetting the name, but Christina and Tiffany, it was linking the sort of community rootedness, the families, the knowledge that we already all held with these folks that I know I used this term before, like helped us translate it into these other pieces that then from the outside get recognized and are understandable. Because we're talking about different worlds here, right? So for the questions of like, how do we start? What do we need? Many of our communities already have these aspects. And then it's the organizations like MakeWay and those sort of connectors to the translators that help us package what we're doing that feels really good in our own ways for the funders, for the governments, for the folks that and the systems that operate outside our own like worldviews and ethics. So I guess as a hope, it'd be amazing to see more communities sort of build those foundations for themselves, for us to learn from each other and support each other in the work that we're doing, and build those up, and then hope with the support of those translator types that like state governments or governments that are and funders who aren't maybe fully aware of how our worlds operate, can get information like this to have an understanding of what it is that we're doing and the impact that it has. Let's see.
And thanks for covering the how-to aspect of, like, I think that's one of the questions that's really difficult to answer in self-determined projects and communities is like, how did you do it? And that would be an interesting conversation, I think. Maybe another webinar, I don't know, MakeWay. How do these self-determined projects start, and what are the secret sauce aspects to these? And then and there's a question about sustainability that you also covered, so thanks for that. So I'll hand it over to Iris about your hopes for the future.
Must-see. That's a really loaded question. I think all of us that do any like this type of work have to be very passionate about your goals. And one of the things that I want to see with the work that we do here is to educate people. To educate people about who we are as Dene people, because I grew up in different parts of the world where there's a lot of misconceptions about Native people. There's a lot of racism towards Native people and Inuit people of the North. They don't know our history. They don't understand what residential school means and the impact of all of that through different generations. One of the things that I've seen over, a period of time is, we're just on the edge of losing our language in our community, but we have strong culture and traditions. We've kept those traditions and those teachings very close to our heart, but the language is something that is a great concern to me. So, like one of my passions is to try to build language in all of our programs and to promote the use of language in everyday life in every home, because I don't think that that's happening anymore. And in the age of technology, like we have to fight with, the digital world with our kids to want to go to our programs. Because if they don't have internet, like it's a sin. You can't get them out in the bush without internet, right? To go to these programs. So like you have to try and build programs that will work and generate interest and build your participation. So yeah, it's really concerning for me that language and education and fostering our stories to make sure that they're not forgotten. And this whole, this whole colonialistic view that we have in the North where, the government of the Northwest Territories, I'm sorry if any of you may be GNWT employees, but, they were always the final say, like they had the power over the communities with anything, with any program, with any funding, with any, all of the authorities, right? Like, be it you're getting a land lease, they wouldn't even consult the communities, they would just give folks land leases. But now that we have Indigenous protected area, that's not the case anymore. It goes through the community, it goes through the structure and the governance structure that we have right now. So we're on equal ground now. And that's a playing field that's so new, I think, for everybody at the table, that we're kind of leading the way in how those relationships are fostered and how we can work together. Because for a long time, and it's still the case in a lot of different places in the North where that's not the case. The GNWT in places may have more authority than the First Nations, and I come from a place where of opposite thinking. I think that First Nations should have the ultimate authority in any of their traditional territories, not the federal government, not the territorial government, but the First Nations should always speak for their areas. So, like my goals are multifaceted, but, I think at the core of it is language. I need to make sure that when I'm done with this program, I'm able to pass it on to somebody else to make sure that, they're going to take care of this baby and keep making it grow and keep making the programs live and get better and better and better. Because when you do a program, you don't always get it right. You have to keep working at it. You have to keep working at it. And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a famous slogan that one of my uncles used to say with the federal government, because they used to come here for like over 50 years trying to make a park. He used to say, you work it, you make it. And that's kind of, the general rule of law around here. So I don't know. I don't think I could just say it's just one thing, one goal that I have. I think I have many goals. Building your team with folks that are also as passionate as you are in making the work for you and for your First Nations and your communities. So Mussy for listening, and that's pretty much what I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Iris. Kirt, your hopes for the future?
Going last and following Iris, man, you guys set me up for failure. How do I top that? Honestly, you go back to Lianne's question. The cloud looming every fiscal year from April 1st to March 31st. It's just funding. We fight for it year after year. So just rewind back to when the program was first implemented. Oceans North was our champion funder for I want to say 5 years, and just so happy still today. So happy that I met Steve Ellis and MakeWay, because MakeWay has been our champion aside from first year joint management that we receive funding for every fiscal, and other funding programs that are multi-year that fit our criteria. I think my goal and my expectation when I'm done is to walk away knowing that there's indeterminate long-term funding. That's my goal, to ensure that this program is long-standing and it's going to be ongoing until that road closes. I think one of the things that always stays in the back of my mind is a question my executive director asked me was, what do you see for the Amagi program? And she said, before you answer that question, think 20 to 25 years. Always think long term. Always stay ahead of every fiscal year to ensure that you're ready and prepared to look for funding. I think I want to go back to Kim Neal's question on chat about she stated over 5 years what were the approximate costs to deliver this analysis. And I want to go back to working with CoEvaluation, Christina and Tiffany, I want to say 4 years ago, 2020, 22, right? We saw a huge gap in our data analysis, our data collection, our documentation, where it was stored, how we stored it. We have so much baseline study from 2019. And when we first started working with Christina and Tiffany, they opened so much doors of how to create a user-friendly software that could store our Inuvialuit documentation that would serve the Inuvialuit communities of Ittaq and Inuvik. And I'm so grateful that we started working on what is known as the Fastfield app we use currently now, which is 100% user-friendly. It's made available to the Ittaq and Inuvik hunters and trappers. We've created so much baseline study regarding water quality, permafrost, erosion, giardia, beaver activities on the highway. Every one of those baseline studies are stored on Fastfield for Inuvialuit, not only present, but for future. So I think that was so important. And I'm blessed to have so much advocacy, not only from Christina and Tiffany, but from Steve and MakeWay and his crew. We've been collaborating or just meeting with Iris and Dene in the past 4 years. So advocacy is all around. It's amazing. And again, goal in the future is knowing that all of this data collection is stored and ready for future generations. That's one expectation met, but lastly, just funding, just indeterminate funding would be, yeah, that's it.
Awesome. I think my last question, we have, I think, 7 minutes. I wanted to ask Christina and Shari what surprised you about this research. Did anything surprise you about this research? Or what stood out? And then we'll hand it over to Steve to close things off.
And start. Not to nerd out about the numbers again, but I think one of the things that really stood out is that when you add changes in life satisfaction and kind of the economic benefits that come from that, the return on investment just gets so much bigger. And so that's something that we know. It's something that we see. It's something that, like Kunuk, you said, is in people's hearts. But the numbers and the data really reflected that. So I wasn't sure how much that would happen, but it really told that story. So that's one thing that stood out.
Yeah, it's funny. I was gonna say the same thing. Like, I think in the beginning, we were all not sure if those aspects would come through in the numbers the way that they did. And like Christina said before, it's still just some parts of the story, but it did come through. And I like the way that Lianne put it before about that body held knowledge. It's like if you're from these communities, if you've lived in these communities, like you just know, there's just a knowing of the value that is there in all these programs. You feel it. It's just that feeling. But to see that you can, show it through some of these numbers and speak it in a language that funders and policymakers can understand, that was a really welcome surprise, and that we hope what's happened is that translation that we were just talking about, where, if you are in Ottawa and thinking about these programs, we've shown it in a way that might be something that can be understood from that perspective. Whereas, you know, Northerners feel it differently. This report tries to express it in a different way, but it's all the same thing, which is just these programs matter and they bring so much value for the investment that can be made. And like Kirt said, I think all of us just hope that, you know, that sustained funding can happen, because these are also long-term efforts. Like Mike talked about, like the growth we've seen in participants, or what Iris and her team have been able to do with their land over time. Like these are long-term projects that are going to outlive all of us. And so we just really hope that this work can speak to that value of investment.
Awesome. I think that's a really good note to end on for the discussion aspect of this. Thanks everyone that asked questions. I didn't cover all of them, but it was a really beautiful conversation. But I'm in a room full of people I love and have worked with for many, many years. And as Kirt was talking, I was thinking about how when you do good work, good people come. And I think this group of people just demonstrates that. And so happy this research is out, and hoping that it has some kind of impact. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Kunuk. And yeah, definitely echo the sentiment that great group of people that I've had the privilege to work with for many, many years. And I think I've seen some comments, but you can feel that vibe. These are people that really enjoy each other's company, have riffed off each other, have learned from each other, from growing from each other, and forged really strong friendships. It's like a small little family. So I think that's really, really cool to see, and that comes through on the screen here. I just wanted to make a couple comments before we close. And, you know, I think this is echoed again in some of the questions and answers, but, you know, the whole point of MakeWay and the partners come together was to provide evidence in a language that made sense to Western bureaucratic institutions. And I'm not saying that people in Western bureaucratic institutions don't have a heart, but often decisions are made based on spreadsheets and whether, you know, budgets appear in the black or the red. And both Lianne and Kirt used the term funding, which I'm really trying to avoid now. I'm trying to use the term investment, which I saw Shari use, because these are not, sometimes when you think of funding, it's like, let's take this money, let's put it over there, and then it just kind of disappears, and we're not really sure what we're buying with that. But when you use the term investment, which I would note our new Carney government is using a lot as well, is that we're putting money somewhere because we believe we're going to get a greater return on that later. And I think that's exactly what this work is demonstrating and is proving, using those hard economic measures, is that these are the types of investments that generate downstream benefit, and significant downstream benefit, that if anybody saw these returns on their RRSPs, they would lose their marbles, right? These are the sorts of investments that make it a no-brainer to move money in these towards these programs. I think the other thing that's a big misconception too is that we're not asking any sort of public government or private investor to like grow money on the money tree and throw it at these programs. Rather, we know that public governments are investing in food security, in mental health and well-being, in physical health, in environmental monitoring, and so on and so forth in communities in inefficient and ineffective ways right now. And if you were to reprofile that existing pot of money that's going to inefficient federal and territorial and provincial programs, and reprofile it for a holistic programmatic approach like Guardian and Hunter programs, you're going to get better bang for your buck for existing dollars that exist right now within public purses. And so that's the compelling argument here. Let's not take new money and throw it at programs. Let's take existing money that's being used poorly by public governments and invest better in programs that are from community, aligned with community culture and vision, and owned by community, and are much more effective in delivering outcomes along the lines of the ones Christina and others have talked about in their programs. So that's the critical thing here. These are essential services. We don't debate whether there should be counselors or nurses or RCMP in communities. We should not be debating whether there should be hunters or guardians as well in those communities, because they as well deliver just as essential services, if not more essential. literally feeding people. So I'll end it there. We could probably go on for another few hours, but really want to thank everybody for joining. Kunuk, thanks for carefully and conscientiously moderating, for all of our speakers, to the two doctors, as they will forever be known going forward. And yes, lots more content to come. There's some links in the chats for those who want to see some of the reports and the toolkit around developing your own evaluation program of this sort. And yeah, let's keep growing these programs and keep making the argument for why they belong in every community across Canada and beyond.